You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, on Twitter at Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, Bob Harris and Mr. Kyle Dvorchak. Mr. Harris, just got back from Italy. It's been a while, gentlemen. What is going on this evening?
Yeah, ciao, baby. That's what they say there, man.
Right.
It was nice to get a little vacation, ready to dive back into the work. We've been away for a little while, and I know Kyle's been very busy. There's been a lot going on, and we're eastbound and down, guys. It's a lot of space to travel, not a long time to get there. So we're gonna have to downshift and get rolling here. And I just think it'd be good to just acknowledge that Rob Gronkowski has retired. A lot has happened. I mean, like everything has happened since we last convened. So we'll run through some of the bigger stories, but I did want to touch base on that. I mean, the fantasy implications going forward are to be determined. The Patriots will need a tight end, somebody to pick up some of that slack, but they'll have to make it up in other ways because there are not a lot of Gronks around. So we'll see what they do in the draft, and that's something we'll dig into after the draft itself, coming up the 25th of this month, I believe it is, gentlemen, in Nashville. I'll be there. Mm-hmm. Then I'll come back and we'll talk about it when we're done. But there have been some big stories, and we'll start out with maybe what might have been the biggest. There were some really big ones. Odell Beckham traded from the Giants to the Browns. Antonio Brown to Oakland, big story. But the Beckham was a big surprise, and it really changes things for the Cleveland Browns and for the New York Giants. Justin, your immediate thoughts on how the Browns are impacted?
When you look at them on paper, I think they arguably have the best offense in the NFL tonight. Weapons galore. He's reunited with Jarvis Landry, his teammate from LSU. They have a sound running game. They have a top 5 tight end in David Njoku and Baker Mayfield. You've heard me use the word moxie with him. One football to go around. I think the Browns, for the first time, maybe ever, really optimistic. So it's going to be interesting to watch how many. I can't envision him having 100 receptions, 95 receptions. I think that, like I said, there's one football to go around. So it's going to be a hell of an offense. They're going to be a ticket to watch, and I'm going to want to watch the Browns every single Sunday. It's going to be interesting. And I talk about geographical relocations. I don't know that Odell Beckham was thrilled in New York. He's kind of a Hollywood-type guy, but sometimes change is good. And Cleveland's not ideal, but when you have a bunch of guys that you want to play with, I think things can obviously be better.
Yeah, it's got the LeBron swag too, and I think he'll appreciate that. It seemed like it was a bit of a shock for him. Kyle, this almost feels like a trap. I feel like we are all going to rush headlong into this thing. We have high expectations. Baker Mayfield, there were times last year where he was playing at an MVP level. Mm-hmm. Freddie Kitchens takes over as the head coach. We liked it. That was where Baker Mayfield met a success with Kitchens as his play caller. Are we getting overly enthusiastic about this, or is there no end to the amount of enthusiasm we should have?
I think we've seen, if you look at early ADP, for those of you who don't do best balls or really just aren't lunatics who are playing all year round, Baker is sort of peaking already. People are already anointing him the next greatest thing, so maybe there's not a ton of value there. Odell, I think, maybe not a ton of value, but just a solid pick in the early rounds. But I'm really looking at the ancillary pieces of this Todd Monken-led offense. I think this is going to be one of the next up-and-coming offenses. And how do you attack those? You attack them, if you want value, by finding the ancillary pieces who just score random touchdowns here and there, or ones that are just undervalued in general. For me, that's Nick Chubb. I think he's going to be the workhorse of this team. I think Kareem Hunt was mostly a depth signing, knowing that they didn't really have any future with Duke Johnson, and that it was sort of a cheap, easy signing for a guy that John Dorsey had drafted when he was in Kansas City. So that was sort of just the puzzle pieces aligned perfectly. I still think Nick Chubb's the guy. And then David Njoku, who I do think I want to watch out for. Demetrius Harris, the backup tight end they signed. I think I thought he was going to become something in Kansas City, maybe if they wanted to use him that way. It never happened, but I do think he's a good backup. So the ancillary pieces that aren't named Jarvis Landry because he's like an inefficient slot receiver. That's where I'm going with.
Right, and I think, on the Kareem Hunt front, we did get word the suspension, 8 games. So, he could show up for the playoffs, fantasy playoff run. My expectations are that, as long as Nick Chubb is doing Nick Chubb-like things, the kind of things we saw last season, that big breakaway threat, the heavy volume play, are capable of handling the heavy workload that we saw last season. I don't have high expectations for Kareem Hunt. That said, Duke Johnson, a lot of talk that he might be on the move. He would like to be traded. They're not going to let him go for a song, so someone's going to actually have to pay up and get him. I think, guys like Antonio Callaway and, if you were interested in maybe Rashard Higgins, those guys kind of fall by the wayside. But this is going to be good offense. I think the other side of the coin, gentlemen, what the hell are the Giants doing, Justin?
I think they're going to struggle. I think, they're sticking with the Eli story. He's our guy, but I can envision them drafting a quarterback early, the next QB. Obviously, they threw some money at Golden Tate. Historically, he's been a 90-reception guy with Matt Stafford. Or again, geographical relocation. But they're down Odell Beckham. You have a top 5 tight end in Evan Ingram. I am a Sterling Shepard guy. And obviously, Saquon Barkley, I think, Saquon Barkley's RB1 tonight, and it's kind of scary on a bleak, maybe potentially one-dimensional offense. I mean, he's going to get the ball. If I'm guaranteed he's going to get the ball 350 times, I'm probably it's a little scary for Barkley. It's going to be an interesting team. They're probably going to finish last in the NFC East.
I kind of hate to see Saquon Barkley's prime years, see him worn to a nub in an offense that really can't do much. But that said, it'll be solid fantasy production. I'm sure they'll work on the offensive line. It seems to be, Kyle, that they've got about 5 guys that are the same thing in the receiving game. Maybe 4. Maybe I have miscounted. But I think the tight end right now maybe is the field stretching component to this offense. You got Sterling Shepard in the slot. You've got Golden Tate kind of works the short range. Saquon Barkley working the short range as well, or the shorter to intermediate range. But maybe all these skills, this all fits into Eli's wheelhouse. Maybe he doesn't have the big arm anymore. Any interest in any of these pieces beyond Barkley for you?
Well, see, the thing is, the way you guys were talking, you're saying Barkley's the guy who's going to get the ball a lot. He's a great receiver. They're going to, they might have a bad offensive line, but he's going to get the ball so much. He's going to dominate their scores. Tell me how that is not so incredibly reminiscent of David Johnson last year, where, he's going to get the ball so much. And he didn't end up what David Johnson, I think, was like a back-end RB1, but you just don't draft him for that. So really, even when you say Barkley, I feel more comfortable with Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara because I know those offenses are going to be good to great. And maybe they won't get as many touches, but we saw David Johnson really controlled the touchdowns in Arizona. I was so happy when he scored those. It felt like 2 touchdowns the entire season, but it was like 90% of their touchdowns. So, the market share of touchdowns on an offense this bad can be really deceiving. So I'm sort of with you in that maybe just go for some volume receivers, but sort of in the early rounds, you want to raise your floor. You can't exactly win your draft because last year you could have won by getting Christian McCaffrey. You could have won by getting Todd Gurley until he kind of busted out at the end of the year. You could have won by getting Alvin Kamara. You couldn't have won by getting David Johnson. You have to avoid the busts more than, their ceiling, everybody in the first 3 rounds has an incredible ceiling. Not all of them have such a low floor as Saquon Barkley. So despite how good he is, he's a guy who I want somebody else to take. I want somebody else to take before I feel obligated to, which is at like picks 2, 3, 4. So other than that, I do think Sterling Shepard's the guy I'm going to go here, despite Golden Tate having so many seasons of, great fantasy production. I just think I'm not really as interested in the old guy new to the offense as opposed to Sterling Shepard, who we saw produce when Odell Beckham was out. So sort of give me the known quantity on this specific offense.
Yeah, I think Evan Ingram, I mentioned the tight end, could get a little something done, but I don't know that, look, it's Justin's sea of mediocrity.
That's right.
He's going to be a shining beacon of possibility for many people in drafts, so I just don't overpay for that. No. I think that's, Golden Tate to me, like Justin said, he's been a very consistent producer, great with yards after the catch. And I just think this is maybe a situation where they're playing into Eli's wheelhouse. So I guess, so here's the thing. If we're looking at Odell Beckham, let's just, a quick rundown. Is he top 5 for everyone?
I think I would say it's debatable. He's no lower than 8. I mean, I think I would incorporate it. You have Devontae Adams, Nuke, Julio, obviously. I think Juju. Without AB, though, Michael Thomas has to be there. I'm still hesitant on Tyreek Hill, and you're getting an Antonio Brown discount, and then Keenan Allen. So, comfortably, top 10. If Jarvis Landry was not there and all these other pieces like Chubb and Njoku who's going to score and obviously Jarvis Landry, he would be a little higher. But one football to go around, I'm going to put him in the top 10. I think we get an Odell Beckham discount this year in fantasy land, just like we're going to get a discount for Antonio Brown.
I'm at number 5. I think the big playmaking capability is going to work well with Baker Mayfield. I think he'll still come through. Maybe not with as Justin suggested, maybe a little less volume. And that brings us to the Antonio Brown move. And so as I look at my rankings, I have Beckham 5, Antonio Brown 6, Juju Smith-Schuster 7. I think those guys are going to move around some, and maybe Antonio Brown ends up in the bottom of that heap. He was traded and got the big contract, so got everything he wanted, except is it sometimes a case of the grass being greener on the other side? I know he did not like Big Ben. They weren't getting along. Is he going to get along, Kyle, with Derek Carr?
Well, I think this one was a case of the money is way greener on the other side because he gets so much freaking money from this deal. But I agree in terms of he doesn't care about his fantasy production. He didn't want to play with Pittsburgh. I don't know why, because now we see he's beefing with Juju. It was on his Instagram. I think he shows a DM of Juju saying like, "Hey man, I really respect you," and he's like, I don't know what the dig is there that like Juju used to look up to him. Like now, now Antonio Brown is no longer worth looking up to.
Antonio Brown's got look. Let's just stipulate this: Antonio Brown has done a really lousy job this year of hiding what Antonio Brown really is. Right. And I think if you read some of the background articles and some of the people who have followed him closely, he's kind of been this guy for a while. But he's hit it well. And look, I'm not going to judge him on that. I don't care what he is off the field. I care what he is on the field. And what he's been on the field is one of the most productive receivers ever in the game, right? So, I mean, he's over 1,250 yards in 6 consecutive seasons. Only he and Torrey Holt have done that. He's the only receiver to top 100 receptions 6 years in a row. No other receiver has ever done it even 5 times. So, I mean, it's great. He's getting older. He's playing with a lesser quarterback. So, would it be unreasonable, Justin, to expect Juju Smith-Schuster to outproduce him? And we look at Juju, is he capable of being that true number 1 without AB playing opposite him?
I think the jury's out. There's no question that he is talented. He's proven that. That being said, I think it helps to have Antonio Brown on the same team because, I mean, they have to watch in terms of coverage. Rapport, the Raiders are going to be down quite a bit. We can all agree there. So we might get force-fed for certain. I'm going to put them in the same scope. It's hard to put Juju Smith-Schuster in front of Antonio Brown tonight. I can't do it. I think they're in the same realm. But a gun to my head, I am not because I got to see a little more out of Juju Smith-Schuster. And now that he doesn't have Antonio Brown, I think that's scary. It's not a Steelers offense that we're accustomed to seeing. Minus Le'Veon Bell. It's just not the same Steelers vibe that we've gotten the last 4 or 5 years.
Right. And I guess that's, and I think the other side of the ball, but the question is going to be the overall prowess of the offense led by Derek Carr. We saw Derek Carr, Kyle, early in his career have some impressive seasons, certainly in the terms of scoring. He's been a little more cautious. He certainly was last year. I mean, basically, Jared Cook now with the New Orleans Saints and Jalen Richard were his top threats because they were the short-range guys. Is AB going to be? Is he going to be okay with this offense?
Yeah, I think it's the jury is out, as Justin said, on whether Antonio Brown will return to the heights of whether this is really where he needs to be to produce the most fantasy points. But given just the overall lack of anybody else to throw to on this team, I know, Bob, you linked an article from the site called Football Diehards, not sure if you ever heard of it, that they have Tyrell Williams now, who's a guy I love, but really that's the bulk of their receiving core is those two and then Jalen Richard. So the targets will be there, and I think looking at last season's offense for them to project that forward just seems almost asinine in the sense that the talent they had was incredibly lacking, and it just didn't seem like they were a well-functioning offense in any way, especially after losing Amari Cooper, who had splash games for them. He wasn't consistent, but I think Antonio Brown will see touchdown regression because scoring 15 touchdowns and only 1,200 yards, just shy of 1,300 actually, is nearly impossible. We won't see that again for a while. But just the amount of targets he's going to get on this offense, even if they still skew more run-heavy than the rest of the league, it's just incredible because who else are going to throw to? Tyrell Williams, certainly a good talent, and I think he adds an element to this offense that they were lacking last year, but it's going to be the Antonio Brown show, just not with as many touchdowns.
Yeah, I think Tyrell Williams is capable of helping Antonio Brown out more so than certainly the other receivers they had there. They did add Isaiah Crowell. Perhaps will be their lead running back. Chris Warren is a guy I'll have my eye on this summer. Jury's still out. We don't know what's up with Marshawn Lynch, so that'll be something to watch as well. But all eyes are going to be on this passing attack, and we'll see what they do in the draft. Are they going to grab a quarterback? That could be interesting as well. We'll see about that. The other huge move, the one we've been waiting for, Le'Veon Bell, signed with the New York Jets, pretty much as expected, I guess. I think that seemed to be the direction. They had a lot of money. So did the Colts. Colts didn't seem to have much interest in playing the free agent game. So Le'Veon Bell is a New York Jet. He will be playing for a man called Adam Gase, who has run many a player out of his locker room. Seems like a bit of a taskmaster. Is this an ideal situation, Justin?
They're going to win some football games, and I like what I saw out of Sam Darnold down the stretch. They have some wide receivers and Robbie Anderson. They threw some money at Quincy Enunwa, the big slot guy, and I like Chris Herndon. So now you have balance. Le'Veon Bell is, from a running back angle, he's gotten the football more than anybody. He just does not leave the field, but he's been blessed with a terrific offensive line for years in Pittsburgh, and some of the numbers I believe are skewed. He's a talented running back, no doubt. He's also a pain in the ass, and he's 27. Hopefully we see shades of the old. I like this Jets offense as a whole. I think he's a top 10 fantasy running back this evening, and I'm, for once, kind of like the Browns, I'm optimistic about the Jets offense.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to counter you. I'm going to contradict you, Justin, because I never do that.
Okay.
I don't think he's a jerk. I think, the last year or so has left a bad taste in the mouths of fantasy owners. I think if you listen to people who follow the team closely, Aditi Kikamwala from NFL Network, who I've had on my Sirius program a handful of times, she's pretty adamant that he is a great locker room presence, a great teammate, when he's present. And he's going to be present, obviously getting paid to be present. They've made a few other additions to this offense. Jamison Crowder, I think, most notable among them.
Right.
So and the arrival of Adam Gase, who, look, there's a reason they went after him. And you mentioned Sam Darnold. Look, Bell's numbers have been phenomenal, right? He's averaged 128.9 total yards per game from 2013 to 2017. It's the highest for an NFL back over the first 5 seasons of his career since 1970, before you guys were even born. He's had 5,336 yards, 35 touchdowns, caught 312 passes. The numbers are all there. He's certainly capable. I think, Kyle, our question is he still that guy? And that's going to be the mystery, right? You're drafting in the top 5. You kind of mentioned, I kind of like to let somebody else be the hero on Saquon Barkley. Would that be a similar approach with Le'Veon Bell for you? Or are you all in, hoping you get a little discount and cash in on that year absence?
Well, yeah, top 5. I don't think, if I'm top 5, there are guys I'd prefer, but I don't think you have to be top 5 to get him. I think you can be just on the backside of the first round to get him. And, Bob, I just wanted to agree with you real quick that I don't think he's probably not a bad guy, because when he left, he had no bad words to say. He didn't say, "Oh, James Conner, you looked up to me. I don't like you anymore." He didn't. He just wanted financial security and to have a decision in where he worked, which feels like a fair assessment. So, back to the point.
I think questioning how he went about it is reasonable, but beyond that, I do think, that maybe the business, you question the business acumen, but you don't necessarily question the heart of the player or the player himself. So where would you rank him right now, Kyle?
Yeah, I'm thinking he's probably, I hate to trash Saquon Barkley and then say he's still like a top 3 or 4 back. So I'm guessing, if I had to think about it right now, he'd probably be 6 or 7. It'd be between him and Melvin Gordon is basically what I would be down to. And in the sense of, does he still have it? What did he used to have that was extremely special? It wasn't that he was the best athlete. He wasn't David Johnson. He has patience and receiving ability, and those are
and he can block.
That are going to age well. And blocking, exactly. These are things that age well and should come back from time off well. It's not like he was Chris Johnson, who always relied on speed, or even David Johnson, I think, may not age quite as well outside of receiving, because David Johnson's such a big, beautiful athlete, and I hate that he's been wasted. In such a horrible team, but maybe they'll be taking Kyler. I'd bet on that.
Okay, Justin. Well, then this sets up the question there. I currently have Le'Veon Bell ranked 6. I have James Conner maybe one player ahead of him. Who are you drafting?
Tonight, I cannot put James Conner in front of Le'Veon Bell. I can't. I like what we saw out of James Conner. I think James Conner is another testament of how the position can change. I mean, when you get past the Chubbs and the Dalvin Cooks of the world, you're looking at names like Marlon Mack and Damian Williams and the Leonard Fournettes of the world. I mean, it's a deep position. I would go tonight: Barkley, Zeke, McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Gurley, Gordon, Le'Veon Bell, and then Connor and the DJs, and then Joe. I do like Joe Mixon. I'll say Joe Mixon is going to be a top 10 back this year. And Dalvin Cook in that scope, but tonight. I'm not putting James Conner in front of Le'Veon Bell. And you hope that again he took a year off, and we saw it with Adrian Peterson. I mean, it's a scary notion when an NFL running back takes a year off. What is he? I mean, it's not like he's just bouncing back into the AAF, and this is the NFL, and
nobody bounces back into the AAF.
No, what a sad. Actually, that was the last show we had. We were talking about the AAF and the timing of the launch, and now it's just like a very sad story there.
Like it never even happened. Move on.
Right, exactly. So he's right there with DJ in that scope there. I'd put him before David Johnson. He's Le'Veon Bell.
Okay, I would not sell Connor short, but again, I talk about my rankings right now. You know, these are pre-NFL draft rankings, and they are going to change 1,000 times. But I do feel like, you know, if you look at the numbers Connor put up last season, they were pretty damn impressive. In fact, Bell-like. In fact, in many cases, better than Bell-like. So I think you shouldn't dismiss him. I think the concern there for me is Jalen Samuel. What kind of role is he going to play in his second year? Will he cut into that as a receiver to a degree that's worrisome? I'm most interested in terms of the Jets just to see how all these pieces fit with they're very pleased with their new uniform. So maybe that'll make everyone happy. But we'll see. We'll see what Adam Gase, Adam Gase is an interesting character, not the easiest fellow to get along with. We'll see how this all plays out. I'm hoping the fresh start for everybody does well. And especially Sam Darnold. I think he's a big winner in all this, too. I mean, having a threat like Le'Veon Bell is a big deal. So let's move on. I mean, look, everybody, we'll be hitting on all these stories more throughout the offseason. And as we start ramping up the number of shows we do as the season draws near, we'll dig into all these things very deeply. But we want to just touch on some of the other moves, some of the higher end moves. And I think the quarterback moves, the one that was basically expected. Nick Foles ends up in Jacksonville. How come I can't get enthusiastic about this, Kyle?
Is it that Nick Foles has been a career backup? Is it that Jacksonville thinks they can win by only running the ball and playing defense? Is it that his best receiver is either Keelan Cole? I don't know. I kind of think it's Keelan Cole. But, you can have your pick of the lot on the reasons to not want him. He doesn't have rushing outside like Blake Bortles had. At best, he's like I don't know. There's just nothing to be excited about. Maybe he sustains an offense with less turnovers, but really sustaining is only good, like only a positive impact for Leonard Fournette, or if one of the receivers truly takes over, which, not that it can't happen, but it didn't seem to be anywhere close to that last year. So, is that it? Does that cover the bases?
I think you got most of them. I think, look, there's some hope, I think, from all of us that D.D. Westbrook can make good on some of the potential we've seen from him. Chris Conley signed there. He has a little history with Nick Foles. They were backups together in Kansas City, after all. And you know what backups do? They sit there and play catch on the sidelines. Look, this is kind of, to me, Nick Foles, and look, I mean, he's had the postseason success has been phenomenal. He's had his seasons, there's no doubt about that. He's also had the pedestrian years. And so I guess which guy is he, Justin, in your mind? Is it the high-end Foles they're getting, or are we going to see the pedestrian Foles?
He's gonna flop. It's a terrible location. But, you're etched. What you say is often etched in my mind. And you say there is a need for competent quarterback, good quarterback play in the NFL. And he has had these resume builders in the postseason, and it's worked to his benefit. But tonight, you're not going to take him over Matt Stafford. You might not take him over Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's bottom of the barrel guys. You might not take him over Joe Flacco, who's now in Denver. I'm not taking him over Marcus Mariota or Derek Carr, or even Sam Darnold for that matter. So he's from a fantasy outlet. Now, look, we're going to talk DFS during the regular season, so there might be weeks where you're going to get Nick Foles for free, and he's going to be that super contrarian play, so you can spend up elsewhere. But you might not even take him over Eli Manning, who's the bottom of the barrel from a fantasy. Awful team. Good for him financially. There's not a lot to like. I agree. Couldn't agree more with what Kyle said.
I was very impressed with the way Jacksonville outbid themselves. That aside, look, I think, this was where this was heading. I think it's an upgrade for the Jaguars. It cannot hurt them. If we get the postseason version, I mean, Nick Foles has been a very good postseason player. So maybe if the Jaguars can get
there,
that'd be
there
good.
First. That's
right.
Good.
And I mean, their defense needs to play better than it did last year. They need their offensive linemen to stay healthy, and they need that one guy, Leonard Fournette, to remain on the field and actually seem motivated. And
doesn't happen.
And we'll see if that happens. The Miami Dolphins. We'll just look. The Dolphins are going to be an interesting team to watch tank. No, that is Brian Flores is an interesting character to me. I think they're going about this the right way. They get Flores from the Patriots. He seems like a no-nonsense, hard-nosed guy. He's going to instill a culture. It's going to take a while to build, and I don't know that they want it to be built this year. I think they're looking ahead. But Ryan Fitzpatrick is a guy we saw with some very high-end production at times before he turns back into a pumpkin and begins throwing all those passes to the other team. Any interest there, Kyle?
Yeah, not entirely. Mostly because I think the receiving core isn't very good in the sense that none of them really, there's nothing that elevates Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think they have some guys who might catch some deep balls from him, namely Kenny Stills, Albert Wilson. Those are guys who will make the back ends of my best ball roster, but he does more for them than they do for him in the sense that he's just a journeyman backup quarterback where last season he caught fire, but we also saw who he was in the sense that there will be more turnovers, more bad plays. I think that's probably, we'll see more of the bad plays, but I do like what you said about, I do think they're doing this the right way, and I wonder how much Brian Flores talked to Bill Belichick about how to build a team from scratch, which is essentially what's happening here, because it seems like that's what they're doing in the correct ways. But I do think this is a good signing for Kenny Stills and Albert Wilson, these fast playmakers, especially Albert Wilson. I liked it when they signed him last year, so not really Fitzpatrick, but it could have been worse. They could have gotten Nick Foles.
Yeah, there you have it. They could have outbid themselves to get Nick Foles. I think that's the
allure with Ryan Fitzpatrick in Miami.
Right. Look, not a lot of allure in Miami. Let's face it. We're hoping Kenyon Drake is busy, but I mean, there's not a lot of guarantees there. Let's look at some of the running backs. There are other quarterbacks. By the way, everyone, go ahead and hit the Football Diehards website. Kyle mentioned it a while ago. If you go, we have a link in the upper left-hand corner to the free agent page. It will give you a rundown of every single free agent move this offseason and links to pertinent articles and updates that will give you any background you need to know. So if you think we're glossing over things, we are, because we want to hit the big moves. And I think one of the big moves kind of impacting a couple teams, Mark Ingram going to the Baltimore Ravens. Look, first of all, Latavius Murray goes to New Orleans from Minnesota to become the new Mark Ingram, right? So right. Alvin Kamara owners, how excited or unexcited should they be by this move, Justin?
He's he's a lesser version of Mark Ingram. I think it's Alvin Kamara, it's deceptive. I mean, Ingram's the inside guy. Kamara was the outside guy. But in actuality, Alvin Kamara is a big guy. We've talked about this. He's 220, 225 on a good day, wet. I think Alvin Kamara can get the football a little bit more, and I think he can handle that because of his size. Mark Ingram has been surprisingly good in the passing game over the last couple of years, and not a lot has worked out for the Baltimore Ravens. They
don't actually have one of those, so there's that.
Right.
The passing game. So far.
Well, right. Well, exactly. So, Mark Ingram, based on volume, he showed us some splashes. He's a top 20 running back in fantasy land right now, right in the same scope as Derrick Henry and Kerryon Johnson and the Chris Carsons and Aaron Jones of the world. The Baltimore Ravens, they're going to be a good football team. They'll win 9 games. It's going to be interesting to see what our boy does in year 2 in Lamar Jackson. But Mark Ingram can get the football as much as anybody. Does not have to share with Alvin Kamara anymore. It'd be interesting to see him in a Baltimore uniform.
Kyle, I joke a little bit, saying they don't have a passing attack, but they do run the ball a hell of a lot. Mark Ingram has rushed for more than 1,000 yards in 2 of the last 3 seasons. He's a pretty effective pass catcher, as Justin noted. Is this going to be a committee? Is it going to be, an Ingram first committee Ingram only? Are we going to see a lot of Gus Edwards still? Kenneth Dixon? He bugs me, Kenneth Dixon. Here's why he bugs me. Why is he still there? There's something going on. The guy's been suspended. He's been hurt, yet still they keep him around. So he's an irritant to me because I think otherwise I'd feel pretty good about everyone else. I just hate having that guy lurking in the background that the coaches seem to have a thing for. But and that aside, Gus Edwards is going to get some turns. But Ingram, he's shared throughout his career, and he's been effective sharing. You think he'll share less here?
No, I think this will be maybe the most dominant in terms of market share of backfield touches he's been in his career, just because, like you said, he's shared. Alvin Kamara comes around and they give the ball to Alvin Kamara. But the thing is, I think, well, to answer your question, Kenneth Dixon stuck around because he was a great receiver coming out of college and because he was a great pass blocker. So he did things that coaches love to see well. And I think, I still don't know how they looked over the injuries and suspension, but apparently he's a good enough, he can play left guard, he's a good enough pass blocker. Anyway, I think that's who they'll utilize to get the ball out of the backfield in terms of passing. But with running quarterbacks, you don't actually see that a lot, so I don't think he'll have much value. And just in terms of Gus Edwards, he's a zero in the passing game, and we've seen so much from Mark Ingram throughout the years that he's a very talented runner that I think it's going to be the Mark Ingram show on the ground, and then if we get any passing production out of the backfield, it'll be Kenneth Dixon.
Right. And Ingram, getting up there in age a little bit, he's 29 years old, but he has shared throughout the course of his career. So it's not like he has a ton of mileage on him. I will note, too, the receiving core right now for the Baltimore Ravens is led by Willie Snead, newly signed Seth Roberts, Chris Moore, Jordan Lastly. This is not a strong group. In fact, this points to a tight end heavy approach. I know this is off the beaten path. Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews both seem like they're going to get drafted in a lot of leagues this year. Justin, are you in?
You can have them.
Nah.
No, but they are in the bottom of the sea of mediocrity. Quite a contrast between a Drew Brees-led offense and this Baltimore team for Mark Ingram. So I think the fact that he played with Brees for as long as he did probably helped him just a little bit on a fast track. I would bet today, but no interest in any of those. Right.
I think Andrews is the guy to watch here. He seems to have a simpatico with Jackson already. So,
Sure.
Maybe a guy I watch. Although Hurst, had the injury last summer, maybe he comes on a little bit. Anyhow, I'm getting back to the Saints. Alvin Kamara. If you'll remember the 4 games when there was no Ingram early last season, when Ingram was suspended. The volume was really solid for Kamara, but I do think Latavius Murray is a guy that can do some damage. Very good goal line threat as well, so he'll be a guy worth watching. And that brings us to a trade. Guy's been a little bit of a disappointment. Mr. Jordan Howard had the strong rookie season, came on at the end of the year, bailed out a number of fantasy teams, including mine. A few of mine under John Fox, but he's maybe well suited to a Jurassic offense, not so much to a modern day offense, it turns out, according to Matt Nagy. Will he be a good fit in Philadelphia, Kyle?
Good fit, because I feel like Philadelphia maybe runs one of the most modern offenses, at least the decision making they have. Good fit, he's a between tackles grinder, but does he fill a role they need of a guy who can carry the ball, because they didn't seem to have that last year? Yes, so I do think, barring that they go out and draft a running back early, which doesn't seem awfully likely, that he fills a role that they didn't have. Is it the most important role in the offense? No, it's actually probably the least important role in the offense. But is it a role that can score touchdowns in the red zone? Sure. So barring they don't really pursue any other running backs in the draft, they don't have any athletic free agents, undrafted free agents that we really want to see land somewhere, I think he's going to be the guy, probably more of a committee guy than the Mark Ingram, but right now he would be my best bet to lead the team in carries, and that's a good offense to lead the team in carries for, so I'm interested.
Yeah, I think
he's just so not good.
Right, not the hands. It's not the receiving back. So speaking of receiving backs, Tariq Cohen, Justin, going in, I think around the 4th round in ADP right now. Is he going to be a tremendous disappointment? Is Mike Davis the guy you'd rather draft about 10 rounds later?
Davis is what he is too. He's another somewhat of a plotter, but we like Tariq Cohen. In fact, Emery Hunt, I can remember saying on record last year, said Tariq Cohen could handle a workload. Is he big enough? I don't know, but I tend to listen when Emery Hunt says something. We gravitate towards the Tariq Cohens of the world. We know what his role is. It's defined. He's a 60. He's probably going to catch between 60 and 70 balls. It'll be interesting. I can't see him having 25 touches a game because he is small. Comparisons to Tyreek Hill. But back to Howard real quick. Look, the Eagles seem plagued is from a running back standpoint. We were hearing the Wendell Smallwoods of the world, Corey Clement, over and over and over again. Didn't work out with Jay Ajayi. Did not work out with DeMarco Murray. They've been plagued. And then here's 50-year-old Darren Sproles. So one thing Jordan Howard has showed us is that he can withstand bulk. We know he's not existent in the passing game, but I will take Jordan Howard for what I'm paying for him, predicated on the bulk, similar to like a Lamar Miller. I think he's going to get the football 20 times a game. Tariq Cohen is what he is. He's going to be a top 20 running back when it's all said and done in PPR formats for certain.
I remain skeptical of all tidy backs. Look, they have a couple of those guys. One of them's named Taylor Gabriel. They seem like he's a gadget player, and they have a lot of those. I think maybe people are going to overpay for Tariq Cohen, but I probably will not be among them. One guy I might pay up for is Tevin Coleman shows up in San Francisco at a bargain price, right? I mean, they got a really sweet deal on him. He reunited with one Kyle Shanahan, with whom he's had some success in Atlanta. Had a super season, I believe it was, in 2016. Had a handful of touchdowns, had 8 touchdown runs, 3 touchdown catches, splitting time with Devonta Freeman. In San Francisco, Tevin Coleman will split time with perhaps Jerick McKinnon, last year's big money guy who tore his ACL in the summer. Should be ready to go. There'll be Matt Breida. The Cheetah is still there. Raheem Mostert is still there. Jeffrey Wilson is still there. There's talk that everyone will be active on game days. A lot of these guys are good special teams players. Mostert in particular. Breida also can handle that. So what do we expect? I guess, Kyle, what would your expectations be for the split here? Is this going to be a week-to-week kind of a Patriots situation where we never get a feel for it? Is this a chance? Does Tevin Coleman have a chance to establish himself as a true feature back?
Yeah, so I'll start from least likely. Jerick McKinnon, sweet Jerick McKinnon, my spark score athletic darling. It's been 5 years, and I'm totally ready to give up. I was ready to give up like 2 years ago, because when you see a guy who doesn't eclipse 600 yards through 5 years in the NFL, you can pretty much call it quits. There are just so few examples of, like, maybe Justin Forsett went that long before breaking out, and then he died immediately. So there's just so few examples of guys who go so long without being productive. So he's out. Tevin Coleman, I do think, has a good chance to break out. Was it worth the price discrepancy between him and Matt Breida, who I think are there's a good chance that they split early on until one of them gets the hot hand approach, which they could both do pretty well in, given that this is going to be a good offense, and good offenses make it easy to run. So for me, it basically comes down to price. We don't have any great idea between Matt Breida and Tevin Coleman, given that I'm ruling out Jerick McKinnon, who's going to get more carries. But Tevin Coleman, given that he's the splashy free agent signing, he's reuniting with his former coach, his ADP is going to skyrocket compared to Matt Breida. So I'll just pay down and let the price discrepancy do the deciding for me.
Little talk about Coleman being the guy that they'll want to use at the goal line, etc. Jerick McKinnon, they paid a hell of a lot of money for, but not really on the hook for him if they decided to move on this offseason. Justin, where are you at on this backfield? And also, where are you at on the passing attack? Jimmy Garoppolo seems like he's well on his way back, ready to return. The receiving core, there are some question marks there. How are you in general on this offense? Everyone not named George Kittle. Skeptical or are you bullish?
In the backfield, I think it's a sad story from a fantasy angle, because Jerick McKinnon, I think we were all optimistic about him last season. I think the time was now, and it just had the chips hasn't fallen in his place now. As far as Coleman, it was a perfect year in a contract year where Devonta Freeman was hurt. There's a good talk about building your resume. For him to land there with Matt Breida, it's cloudy. So you either A, avoid the whole situation, or B, they all come at a pretty much discounted cost. It's you scoop them all up and you stash, and then you don't pray for any injuries, but now you have occupied the whole backfield. Outside of George Kittle, who was a top 3 tight ends, you've spoken to him on a couple of occasions. I don't have a ton of interest in. I will say this: there was a rookie last year in San Francisco, Dante Pettis, who was intriguing. I was optimistic about Marquise Goodwin, but it's it's going to be a bleak offense. The cloudy is an understatement for this backfield, so I'm either going to avoid it all or I'm going to scoop all these guys up and just stash them.
Yeah, I don't think I think it's a pretty good look for the offense in general. I just think it's going to be a tough haul for fantasy owners within this offense, trying to figure out who's going to spike at any given time. And I think if I had to bet on one guy, not named George Kittle, it would be Tevin Coleman at this point. But this is one we'll all have to be watching, throughout the OTAs, through the draft, and really get a good feel for what's going on. There was one other running back move, I think that, there were a number of other ones, but one that kind of, I guess it put a little bit of a damper. I've kind of been watching, you looked at the extension Damian Williams got in Kansas City late last season. It seemed like they were locking him up to an affordable yet still pretty solid deal. Maybe let him be the feature back. It seems like anyone who plays that position is going to get the bulk of the work, is going to be productive, right? So then they go out and they sign Carlos Hyde. I don't know. Carlos Hyde has not impressed me for a little while, but does it cause you some concern, Kyle, with Damian Williams, or were you not impressed with Damian Williams enough already?
I was so impressed. Yeah, like you said, I was so impressed with Damian Williams that just anything to make me feel a tinge of dissent, a tinge of doubt in my mind is really disappointing. But I have to lean on what we saw last year, is that Damian Williams was incredibly good. He played really well in the limited time, and that Carlos Hyde looked like really bad, incredibly useless. He's not a great receiver. Yeah. He got a lot of targets when he was in San Francisco, but he wasn't very productive on those targets. So I'm just not sure he fills the role other than grinder, whereas Damian Williams looked talented. And like you said, it's because of the offense, and if, late in the season Damian Williams sprains his ankle, I'll be the first one picking Carlos Hyde up, because I know despite his lack of talent, I think as soon as he steps into the role, he'll at least be a top-tier running back. Maybe he won't be Damian Williams, because, how many players really are that good? But anyone can succeed in this offense. I'm going to go with who I think is more talented, and I don't know how talented Damian Williams is, but I do know that Carlos Hyde isn't that talented, so that's where I lean on this.
Justin, I just, kind of spitting off this a little bit, because I'm still Team Williams on this one, and whether you are or not, we've got the issues with Tariq Cohen. We don't know what's going to be going on with him. No resolution there. Is Sammy Watkins the guy you might be looking at?
Absolutely. And I think you would be in agreement with me at this point in time. Sure. He was plagued at Buffalo. We saw him at Clemson. When he's Sammy Watkins is no doubt a talented wide receiver in the NFL. We want to see. He has Patrick Mahomes, who you guys were skeptical about last year, and it complements Tyreek Hill well. So you're going to get a Sammy Watkins discount. I think Sammy Watkins on paper, outside of a fantasy angle, is a top 25, top 30 wide receiver in the NFL. Who's Damian Williams?
Go ahead, Justin.
No. I like Kyle said, who is Damian Williams at this point? Going back to Carlos Hyde, 4 teams. He's a volume back. He was a top 10 running back in fantasy land a couple of years ago in San Francisco. That was predicated on volume. Had 30, 40 receptions, but there's something just not right with him. He's a definite stash. I don't know that I'm going to draft Damian Williams, although we love the Chiefs' offense. But I don't know that I'm taking Williams over a guy like Sony Michel or Fournette. He's in that scope right now, and he's right underneath Nick Chubb, and there's just no way I'm going to pay a premium because we don't know who he is. There's not a big enough sample.
Yeah, I think, the price is right. I'm liking Damian Williams still. But back to Watkins, our guy Mike Clay over at ESPN pointed out the Watkins averaged 21% target share during the 10 games he played last season. And that's only 4 fewer targets in those games than Tyreek Hill had. So interesting. He's a guy that maybe people want to keep an eye on, and maybe we'll get at a reasonable price, a little bit of a discount because of the fears for the injuries. And, of course, you're running that risk as well. And that brings us to a couple of wide receivers I wanted to touch on for the purposes of this. I think so. OK, Devin Funchess has not been a thrilling guy, right? But did he land maybe, Kyle, in one of the more thrilling destinations?
Oh, this is what you wanted if you owned him in Dynasty, or if you're just a fan of him. I'm not sure how many fans he has. He's not that good. But if you were a fan of him, had him in Dynasty, or just wanted the right fit, the right place to get filled, this is absolutely it. It was maybe this in Green Bay. And
he ended up in Indianapolis. I should have thrown that out already.
He ends up in Indianapolis. He will maybe be playing across from T.Y. Hilton, depending on if they take any wide receivers in the draft, which I think still is not out of the realm of possibility, given that they signed him on a 1-year deal. It is a good 1-year deal for him. It's a good proof.
Really good.
He gets paid a lot of money to prove it, and if he doesn't prove it, he's still got 1 year of good money. But he's just not talented. I think if they really don't go out and get anybody else, they don't sign anyone, or I guess at this point don't draft anyone who we think has a semblance of talent, it's Dante Moncrief all over again, where he at least catches 6 to 7 touchdowns, and he's a good best ball pick. He's going to be extremely hard to nail down which weeks it'll happen, but in best ball, that's a good 6 to 7 touchdowns that you get at a pretty low cost. So I think it'll really depend. This is one of the ones that the draft will be most important for, but it probably doesn't cost a lot to draft him right now if you're playing best ball, so it's not a bad shot to take.
Yeah, I think the good news is he's a big body, and perhaps Andrew Luck will mistake him for one of those tight ends he loves to throw the ball to every single down. So, Justin, are you going to have any investments in Devin Funchess, or are you going to let his lousy season last year? Look, he is what he is, right?
I think so. I mean, he's a better version of Kelvin Benjamin. They drafted him, for Cam Newton to have the big body to throw at. Now, Eric Ebron has come into his own in Indianapolis, and of course, a couple seasons ago, the other tight end, Jack Doyle had 70, 80 receptions. So is it, Philip Dorsett didn't work out there. Dante Moncrief didn't work out. I think if you're T.Y. Hilton, you're kind of happy. You have a 6'5" wide receiver, big body. Andrew, weapons galore. I think you're going to have a sound run game with Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines. So it's going to be a good Colts offense, I think, for the price. Again, Funchess can be a red zone presence, 6'4", 6'5", big body. I think he can easily have 7, 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think that is not unreasonable. Another wide receiver move that was not Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham level was Deshaun Jackson returning to his roots in Philadelphia. Is he anything more, Justin, than a best ball guy at this point in his career?
The son is the same in a relative way, but you're older. His career started there, and it was a beautiful thing. And I think tonight, Deshaun Jackson is probably as fast as anybody in the NFL. He just is aged like fine wine. So I think he's going to be a good complementary piece. If you're the Eagles, you got to be happy about this. They're going to be a damn good offense, and he's going to do Deshaun Jackson things periodically. What I mean by that is he's going to have 4, 5 receptions for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. I will take him. I'll buy tonight on the cheap.
Yeah, I think if the ADP is right, he'll be a guy that I have an eye on. We'll see what Carson Wentz can do with this receiving core and with maybe Jordan Howard at running back. One other guy, look, there are a few tight end moves, and again, Justin's favorite position. I think Jesse James going to Detroit is something he'll be very enthusiastic about. But I think we're all kind of interested in Jared Cook moving on to the New Orleans Saints, coming off a huge year in Oakland last year. And kind of as I mentioned, I mean, part of that was the necessity of seeming like Derek Carr was playing it safe and trying not to get killed. So he was unleashing the shorter and intermediate range passes as opposed to the more deep throws. Look, we've seen the tight end position, in New Orleans, it's been dominant at times. I mean, going back to the Jimmy Graham time, Ben Watson's had some success there in his first round, less so in his most recent. But Cook is a guy who throughout his career has been, in my estimation, a guy who shows up about 4 games a year. Last year, he seemed to put it all together. Can he keep the role going, Kyle?
I feel similar to you that he's a guy who shows up every now and then, but that's just kind of the nature of the position if you're the starter. And I feel like he'll be the same way. Maybe that happens instead of 3 to 4 times, it'll happen 5 to 6 times. But I think the hype will almost certainly get out of control too quickly because he's a guy who's really been relevant throughout his career 1, maybe 2 times. I knew he had one other season where I was just looking at he got 99 targets. He didn't really produce a lot on them. So he's an ancillary piece on a great offense for me because this is the Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara show. And I think we'll see Latavius Murray, I think will fill the Mark Ingram role pretty well. So those 3 guys will be the focal points of this offense. And then it's just pick your poison on when you want to go on one of their Keith Kirkwoods if you're really feeling daring. But people are going to value him like he's an elite tight end or a higher end tight end going into this offense. And I don't think he is. I think he was a volume-fueled tight end last year. So I think his price, unless it's on a daily fantasy, is going to be too high throughout the offseason.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. So We'll run through some more of these things as we move along over the course of time here. Again, we'll start ramping up after we get past the draft. Coming up later this month in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm looking forward to heading down that way to enjoy the festivities, and we'll return and reconvene after that. In the meantime, we can all sit back and watch the Green Bay Packers soap opera that's emerging. The Tyler Dunn report refuted today by Aaron Rodgers, who claims he loves him some Mike McCarthy. And nobody told him he didn't need to be the problem, including Packers president Mark Murphy. So plenty of entertainment to go around between now and the draft. So enjoy all that. Anybody got any final thoughts, Justin?
No, we'll be coming at you weekly once the season starts. Brought to you by DraftKings. We'll talk DFS, but there's going to be a lot of football, and I'm excited to talk to my boys again. It feels like it's been forever. And again, I think the last time we spoke was the AAF birth, and then of course the death came the other day, which is a sad story. So I'm looking forward to rapping with you guys more frequently.
All right, Kyle, wrap it up.
Yeah, RIP to the AAF. I think we got Rashad Ross signed with the Panthers.
We did.
He was a special teams guy, so I think maybe he has a chance to stick on if he feels that need.
I think, again, I always bury the lead because I forget to ask Kyle, Zach Zenner update.
Oh, my God. Don't. We had such a good, I was in a good mood. We have the NCAA championship going downstairs to watch that later. It was a good game at halftime, I think. I was excited. I had a good night going. Got all my stuff done for finals. Thanks for ruining my night. Oh, my God. So, last year, they signed LeGarrette Blount. They're like, we need a plotter, a not talented plotter on this team because we've got a talented between the tackles guy, but let's sign an untalented one, give him 154 carries, like 2.7 yards a carry. They're like, let's do it again, put C.J. Anderson in there. They probably saw him playing for Los Angeles and thought he's still good, despite us knowing he's not good. It's very clear that he's not good, and you can just plug and play bad players into Los Angeles to the Kansas City offense. They're like, no, I bet he's good. So we're going to get the same thing this year. Yeah, I don't even want, guys, we'll see if the podcast comes back. I'm not sure. If the podcast comes back, I have been your co-host, Kyle Dvorchak. Find me on Twitter at FFKyleTheKid. Find Bob Harris at Football Diehard, Justin Lonero at Justin Lonero. We'll maybe see you next week. I don't know. Maybe not. Who cares?